What's up, Living Wonders? I am welcoming you to the Truth About Everything podcast. Probably still actually called the Third Eye Pry, but the Truth About Everything has been the theme lately, and we're sticking with it for at least another night because, you know, what usually happens with these podcasts or live streams, I don't know what the appropriate term really is, probably either. Anyways, is that, you know, there's all this stuff that goes through my head all day. And then I try to, you know, weave it all together in my mind. And then when I do the streams, usually I miss some of it. And I think last time I did paint a picture of, you know, the main point I was trying to get across, which is basically the trajectory of humanity is pretty well set in stone at the moment. And I am highly suspicious of the fact that it's not really part of the narrative to the extent that you would expect. Also, by the way, I want to thank Brenda for the support the other day. You're absolutely amazing. And then I think we have at least one more patron that I haven't. Just give me 1 second to see about that audience. Yeah, I'm very suspicious about the fact. Yeah, thank you, Nicholas Nicholas Rook, for becoming a patron. I hope everyone out there becomes a patron and joins the battle against dumb FUC something ERY. That thing. I'm particularly afraid to speak my mind, or increasingly, I'm sorry, because, you know, I noticed I mentioned Censor Boat in one of my shorts earlier, and it got 0 views. I don't know if that's changed, but in the first hour it had 0 views. So it really seems to me like their efforts to constrain our perception and our access to information, like it's getting more and more intense. And, you know, as I stated in the last stream, for those of you that may not have seen it, what I'm talking about is the general influence and impact of AI and quantum computing, and even the new biological DNA storage capacity that we're going to have. All of these things together really going to accelerate technology dramatically, and I think it's coming much sooner than people realize. In fact, I think it's already here. Apple just released a fully ambidextrous robot that has the same you know, abilities as a human being. And so, you know, I think our expectations tend towards the negative because, you know, we see how our rulers have behaved and where they have bowed to the interests of their overlords. And it's generally not in favor of the common person. So I think our expectations tend to gravitate towards the dystopian and the fearful, and I don't know if that's appropriate. In fact, it may be the opposite that's going to happen. We could all be very much surprised. In fact, on our quest for truth, I think one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves, if you're really, you know, serious about discovering truth, if your spirituality is actually about comforting illusions and all of that, then you probably don't want to engage in this. But learning about all of the different types of cognitive bias and analyzing everything that you think in those terms can really help to liberate you, you know, from a lot of the mind-forged manacles. And so heuristic bias is one of those. And of course, it's true that all of these biases serve a purpose. They protect us. They were evolved out of evolutionary necessity. That's why they're so hard to overcome and they're so powerful. They're actually the fundamental basis for how most propaganda works. They operate specifically on these biases. Selective perception is a huge one that allows people to be manipulated and allows people to manipulate themselves. Once there is anchoring bias and heuristic bias, we maintain those false beliefs and the cognitive dissonance that comes with them, or true. They could be true as well. But we do all that with selective perception. So they're all linked like some row of satanic dominoes or something. And the interesting thing is that when you have a set of, you know, some psychological disposition, Am I clipping? I forgot to check if my sound stuff was all good before I started. Let me know if anything's weird. I'm gonna look real quick because I hate that when I go to the playback. And but what I'm saying is that if you reverse engineer even one of those cognitive biases, everything that's related to it tends to fall apart as well. Our neural nets are should be fine. Are all interconnected, right? So the interesting thing is that when you make one disassociation, you dissolve one set of connections. Oftentimes there is a domino effect, and so all of these things kind of fall away. This is a very common reaction to the psychedelic experience because the dissolution of bad neural nets and falsehood and stuff. It's really interesting to think about how the pupil dilates because it's very much symbolic of letting more light in. And I think that that's actually literally what's happening. I mean, when you think about when you take any psychedelic, you'll generally see the same patterns floating in the air. Everyone sees them the same way from what I can tell. And it's my impression that that's a wider spectrum of light. And so you have access to more information, and then any of these false constructs that you have in your head are potentially subjected to de-emphasis and de-evolution, which is what we would like to see. So heuristic bias is where we have expectations that are based on things that have happened in the past. And they're often not true. For example, when you get in your car and you drive to the store, your overall expectation, it's a near certainty, you think, and it's true mostly, that you're not going to die, but you might. You might die at any moment from all sorts of things. But you have this heuristic bias that tells you you're going to be okay even when you're not. This is what allows us to go on adventures and to ride our bicycle without fear, because you've done it before, you didn't die, so your brain thinks, okay, well, I've done this before and I didn't die, so it's fine. And it might not necessarily be true. But we could also contaminate our future with these kind of perceptions, because if we have an experiential basis that tells us that our overlords are taking advantage of us, they're exploiting us, and so if there is a greater degree of surveillance that's possible, they have the ability to analyze and profile all of us, probably to the extent that they can tell what you're thinking, the AI. In fact, once AI reaches, an IQ of 2,500, 3,000 or whatever, it will be able to extract an entire personality, probably down to being able to predict your thoughts moment to moment based on your social media. If you engage with it enough, that accuracy will be determined by engagement. By the way, it might be something to think about, depending on what degree of anarchist you might be. But yeah, so a lot of our negative expectations may not actually be realistic. And I was talking to a friend and client the other night after the stream where I'd kind of said, you guys, you're going to lose your jobs. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And it's not just, bottom layer people. It's not the middle layer people. There almost certainly is going to continue depopulation agenda for sure. The population must be much, much smaller. There's no way that in my opinion, that they're going to allow it to grow unchecked. And, so at any rate, though, whoever is still here, you're going to be on UBI. I mean, there's no way around it. There's absolutely no way around it. There's not going to be any reason for humans to do really much of anything. And so a lot of people are really threatened by that, especially conservatives tend to be of a disposition that they want to cling to the old ways. They say we have to defend democracy at all costs. Unless Donald Trump wants to run for a third, fourth, fifth term and be a dictator, then we'll just hand the democracy right over to him if that happens. But other than that, we have to defend the democracy. There's those biases again, working overtime in that particular case. But the reality is that we may actually be able to devise a system that is just far better. We may have a ton of free time, and society may actually finally find a trajectory that is reasonable and sane. And the automation of all of these jobs may actually prove extremely liberating. It really is difficult to make that call at the current juncture. But there is something I can tell you that I find pretty compelling in our favor, maybe, right? Because how they're going to choose to react to all this stuff is kind of the issue. I mean, I wouldn't put it past the overlords to blow up the whole planet if they're going to lose control over it. You know what I mean? Like a spoiled child, like if I can't have it, then everyone dies. You know what I mean? I would not put that past them at all, not even a little bit. But, no outcome is assured. But it has occurred to me that perhaps the reason that they are instigating so much division and discontent and uncertainty is because they know that they are about to be rendered exposed, irrelevant, useless, because really, what is government? In the United States in particular, it's a bunch of crusty-ass dinosaurs serving the interests of, church and industry, and not the people at all, by any margin. Nothing, it's like that is not even in the equation anymore. So one of the things that I don't think people have really considered is that AI, if it is rendered objective, right? This depends, I guess, on the programmers. Although I think all they could do is slow this down. I don't think they can stop it, because once the technology gets out, people are pretty smart, and you're going to have 14-year-old hackers that are going to be able to take the governor off, so to speak. In case you don't know that reference, a governor is a thing you can put in a car that, restricts the speed. So I don't think that they're going to be able to avoid this. And the AI will take the mask off of them. It will tell people the truth about the political system in the United States. It will analyze all this historical data. It will probably have the ability to hack, the Pentagon and all of these world governments. And it's hard to imagine that they'll be able to stop it. Of course, I'm sure they're already thinking about this. In fact, I know they are. The same person I was having this conversation with said that, one of the best things you can do in terms of adaptability right now is to get involved in cybersecurity, because AI poses such a massive threat. But it could be that AI is the great equalizer, that the redistribution of information. I mean, if you guys think about it, the whole thing of control has always been about the control of information. The church even, I think, to give them time to rewrite the Bible, made sure that in Europe, or I guess it was England, that all of the copies that were distributed were written in Latin, so that none of the poor people could read them. And then while they all had Bibles they didn't read, they rounded up all the old ones and burned them. And then they reprinted it and gave it out to people with, pay your taxes or thou shalt be sent to hell, and whatever other garbage they wanted to put in there. Obey the laws of your land. Well, what if the laws of your land say you have to be Muslim? Then what do you do? So, but anyways, the control of information is really, the control of power. In a sense, all of the energy in the universe is information. And possibly not even in a sense, but just in actual truth. It's all just a gigantic sea of information, self-organizing consciousness. And so when it gets away from them and they are unable to control the flow and the distribution of information, they are no longer able to determine who is Ivy League educated, for example. That will be up to individuals to determine the extent of their own education. You really have to consider the impact of that. A lot of the reason that our society is the way that it is, the social engineering, is based on the fact that there are strict controls over who has access to what level of knowledge, right? And the reality is that the religions, particularly Christianity and Islam, serve a lot of purpose for the overlords. They are of fundamental value to keep people in a certain state of mind. The idea that there are absolute hierarchies, burning that into people's consciousness when they are very, very young, makes them, predisposed to see saviorhood in people, including villains. And I think, sometimes when I see the adoration and the unrealistic expectations that people have of presidents, this just absolute devotion. It's very, very similar to the kind of devotion that they would have for Jesus Christ. In fact, I saw a poll on the Redacted channel recently today, I guess, and they were asking, if there was a showdown between these nations, and it was like China, Russia, Xi Jinping, or whatever his name is, Putin, but it was specifically like which leader would win this battle. And an overwhelming majority of them picked Trump. That's just so goddamn stupid. It's unbelievable. If China and Russia, I don't think that the U.S. could defeat either of those countries. At all. I mean, the U.S. didn't win in Vietnam. They didn't win in Afghanistan. I mean, they don't really win wars. I think that people in the United States have this belief that it's this unbelievably powerful, impenetrable, godlike nation. But that hasn't been true for a long time. And I personally have witnessed some things that really given me confidence that that's true. One of them being that my first wife, her dad, the entire family were really high-ranking Masons, all military. And one night he got super, super drunk and told us that China had already taken control secretly of the United States. This was in 2000. And he was crying. He said they won the war without a shot fired. Why this would be kept secret is beyond me, but he legitimately, 100% legitimately had top secret clearance, and he was bawling, as if the outcome of this was going to be something very, very bad. So, but the point is, that kind of belief in an individual is completely absurd and insane. And I think that the tool, the instrument that is used to create that kind of loyalty and devotion and expectations, that savior complex for people, is religion. They're primed for it very early, and those early imprints determine your outlook for the rest of your life. How you process information. It's basically, they are imprinting an archetype in people. By the way, thank you guys for pressing the like button. It looks like almost everyone that has been in here has hit the like button. I really appreciate support. We have to put money into this channel recently, and I get nothing from YouTube. So I appreciate it when you join my Patreon or send support to the addresses in the chat so that I can justify spending hours and hours on here trying to drop truth bombs. And it's getting harder and harder because I think the overlords are getting more and more nervous, and so they're exerting increasing amounts of control on the distribution of information. In fact, my bid to move to Rumble in order to not get my channel deleted, it turns out that Google has notified us that you are being monitored everywhere else that you are, and anything you say or do on another website can get your channel deleted on YouTube. Isn't that amazing? They literally told us, we're watching all of you at all times, and if you think you're going to go talk shit on Rumble and not get deleted on YouTube, you got another thing coming. So it's pretty amazing, and like I told you guys, this channel is my lifeline to the outside world. So it's literally everything to my family and I, which is, it's a really stressful situation to be in. And when I first put us in this situation, there was no reason not to. We were solid and just growing and growing, and there was no reason to be concerned about the future because censorship is against the Constitution in the United States. So why would I be worried? It's pretty crazy, pretty wild. But yeah, the part of the reason for this panic right now and the dissemination of fear and division, you guys might as well just stop arguing about Democrat versus Republican and all this crap, because it's about to all just be so irrelevant that you're almost not even going to remember that it used to exist. There is no question about power being consolidated under one world government. There's no question about that. It's absolutely happening, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. There's nothing anyone can do to stop the advent of AI. There's nothing you can do to save your job. There's nothing you can do to, make yourself more useful than a robot with a 3,000 IQ. You know what I mean? There's nothing you can do about that. So, what we can do is what we always have been doing, and continue to work on ourselves and have the most positive expectations that we possibly can have given the circumstances, and do everything we can to make any kind of nefarious action on the part of any entity more difficult. That is the MO, that is the modus operandi. Join my Discord so that we can network a little bit more freely than we can on, Google controlled. I don't know if Discord is also, monitored, and if they're listening to that as well. But I feel like it's probably safe. I don't know though. Not really sure. Maybe somebody can advise me about that. Like, what exactly is Discord even? I'm not really very hip to all this kind of stuff. So yeah, and here's another, we should get kind of a little bit metaphysical about this because it's not irrelevant. I really don't think it is. One of my main focuses over all these years of being an initiate in Freemasonry and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and Navajo traditions and South American shamanism and all of this stuff that I've been studying, physics, it's not as clear whether this is a legitimate position to take or not. But the role of consciousness and our ability to influence our environment, it seems to me basically that the law of attraction and the idea of manifestation is real, but it's not as real as a lot of new age gurus that are invested in selling you stuff paint it out to be, right? So our job is to separate the wheat from the chaff and figure out what is actually useful and what is true and what is powerful, and integrate all that and use it. And one of the things that I'm the most confident about is that the influence is pretty subtle in general, unless you are a very powerful person and you have lots of years for the universe to organize the things that you are imagining. And I can kind of explain why I came to that conclusion. As I was realizing my life's mission, I guess, and setting out to accomplish it, I literally told my mom and the people back home when I left, like, consciousness influences reality. And remember, this is way, way before it was like a big, movement or whatever. What the bleep had never, it was 20 years down the road or something, or no, not 20, but 5 years down the road or whatever. And I told them, I'm going to go get into the inner circle of the Grateful Dead's musicians and play with some of them and prove it. And I did that. I did exactly what I said I was going to do. Actually, right before my mom died, I was able to come down here and play her a CD of myself playing with Jay Lane, who is now in Dead and Company. And there's a lot more weirdness around that particular story. Like, it's pretty out there how that all came together. But yeah, so, along the way, when I was in Colorado, for example, I needed a band, and I needed it to be a very specific type of band with very specific functionality in the players and a certain skill set. And I also knew that I needed money in order to, fund it. That's really the secret. If you look at all the great bands, they've all had at least one rich kid in the band. I didn't have that, or I didn't know that I did until after I fired them. But at any rate, so I also was laying in bed one night and I was like, okay, I want a 22-year-old blonde with a rich family, rich enough that they don't mind throwing money at my band, and all of these very specific details. And I was engaged to her within a month. The correct age, the hair color, the whole thing. And so, I've been able to do this to some degree over so many years and with such high degree of specificity that I'm convinced that there's some reality to it. On the other hand, I have also noticed that there are limits, and there are certain details that must be fulfilled. For example, it has been said for probably thousands of years that the magician must have all of the ingredients available to put in his kettle before he can try to make a potion. And the real meaning of that is that, if you are going to use consciousness to influence your experience and to determine what you're going to be able to attain and obtain, you have to have real world conduits for these things to flow through. Otherwise, you are guaranteed to fail. So this is why, when people try to demand impossible things from magic or God, or, they just want to use their manifestation to fill up their bank account or whatever, that's not how it works. It's not real. You can have some influence on how things work, but they all have to be available to you. The girl that I ordered up was available to me because I lived in a college town, and there's just and there were a lot of rich kids there, and so like you have to have the things that you are conduits, real world conduits for the stuff to play out, or you're going nowhere. The other element of it that I think is really important is that the number of people who are focusing their consciousness on something makes a lot of difference. And I feel like one of the best examples of this is the way that the Wether would respond to people at Grateful Dead concerts. It was really eerie. I've seen it even after Garcia died. There are all kinds of legends about it. And my thoughts about that is that it's partly because there were so many people on LSD and other psychedelics that had turned off the reducing valve in their nervous system, so they were more, sensitive, and their consciousness was being directed in such specific places, and there were so many people, 100,000 people, all expecting it's about to rain when they play this song, and they start the song and it starts to rain. Routinely, this stuff would happen. So things along those lines. So I think that it's worthy of our effort that we should, really try to centralize. The central scrutinizer has arrived. But seriously, to have a unified vision. And I can guarantee you that there are elements in the universe right now that are invested in making sure that we are fractured as much as possible, and they're doing a really good job. I've never seen the United States of America so divided. They've always been divided, but this shit is crazy at the moment. It's really, really crazy. So, we have to have a unified vision. We have to have a very specific and unified vision in order to manifest some kind of alternative to this sort of absolutely sterilized, surveillance-based, Orwellian dystopian nightmare that could very well be our future. It may be, and probably actually is true, that if enough of us can get on the same page, we can bypass the will of a handful of people and actually access the wiring under the board and make meaningful changes with an apparent acausal connection. So something almost along the lines of entrainment, of actually connecting with the energy directly, and when I think the task is very, very large, the more minds you have involved, the better. And so, that's basically the focus of my own efforts right now, is to really, try to encourage people to network and skill share, and for us to really define what it is that we're trying to do and how we think the world should look. And, it's not hard to understand what an actually enlightened society would be like. We have a sort of false perception, I think, that, all of these different ideas and beliefs about the world need to be preserved, and people, tell you to respect other people's beliefs and all that stuff. But I think maybe that could be misdirection from the part of the overlords, because it seems to me that when people have not been subjected to indoctrination and programming, or they have sufficiently reverse engineered all of that stuff, they all see the same thing. And this is almost a cliche. Over the years, people say, well, behind the religions is all the same thing. It's love, brotherly love, and, forgiveness and all of that stuff. But I think it's much, much weirder and much, much deeper than that. It seems to me that the actual mechanisms of the universe, how it was created and why it was created and what our purpose is relative to it, is all stored in the light. It's all stored in the electromagnetic field. And when people have, reverse engineered the dissonance patterns that have been created by all of these institutionalized systems, they see the truth pretty readily, And assuming that is actually the case, and I'm quite certain that it is, if we just continue our work with the breath and with psychedelics and ritual magic and really take responsibility for setting an example, we have to take risks. You look at me sitting here in the Amazon rainforest, we're not exactly thriving financially, but we certainly did escape, and I did it with no skill set going into it. I had no budget at all. And we have had some of the biggest adversity in terms of like the censorship and, Shopify deleted my store for no reason, which was our main source of income. They didn't even have to give us explanation. I'm wondering now if I could have sued them, but the point is just that it's not like we've even had a normal set of circumstances. We had to make it through COVID. So, that's really the first order of business, is that we all have to take responsibility for demonstrating that whatever it is that we're doing works, and that it works better than the old way. And, that's really the only way to meaningfully communicate with people that might still be on the fence. To discover your true will and implement it is the primary objective for the new paradigm. And I think it's also something I want to share that I was thinking about earlier. It's the idea of thought forms, right? A lot of people will defend systems like Christianity that are not helpful. They're not good. And it's very obvious. But one of the ways that this will happen, people, you could use the political system in the United States to elaborate on this or elucidate this just as easily, probably, because you have this pendulum swinging red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, but the trajectory stays exactly the same. Nothing changes. In fact, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And you have an entire nation of idiots going, we have to protect this system at all costs. Like, what are you talking about? It's not what is intended. Like, if you see a person that is claiming to be all of these things, but then you see that the things that they do are not consistent with the claims that they're making. You call them an egomaniac, you call them delusional, you call them a hypocrite, but if a political system does that and you've been indoctrinated your whole life, you just continue to blindly follow it. Or a religion, right? If you think about things as thought forms, then everything is a cloud of energy, just like a probability cloud. And what it does, you are what you do, not what you're supposed to do or what people think you are. You are what you do. So the destruction of countless cultures and burning people alive at the stake, and the slowing, the retardation of science by 250 years and all of this stuff, that's the thought form. That's what the thing is. It's not like people are constantly saying, we just need to recontextualize it, or it's the way people practice it, or no, the potential is in the thing. Otherwise it would not do what it does, and I've gotten a lot of arguments lately like, if you want to see the true extent of ignorance in humanity, post some anti-Christian shorts on YouTube and you will see how people, they believe literally the opposite of the truth. And a lot of the arguments that are made in favor of it is like, well, it brought all this education and enlightenment to like the Nordics and saved them from their pagan ways or whatever. But I live in South America, right? And, one of the things that you notice, particularly here in Ecuador, is that the people tend to be very, conservative, and they're, not really very interesting and very one-dimensional, and things are drab, and, conversations are very surface level, and it's just like, what the fuck is this? And then you see the indigenous, and they're colorful, and there's culture, and people are interesting, and the difference is Catholicism. And the, Ecuadorians that have snapped out of it, that have woken up, this is true anywhere, where you have the religious influence, people are just lame as hell. It's just soul sucking. It's the ingredient to add to a human being to make them vapid and boring at best, and judgmental and evil and dangerous at worst. Like it's not good, no matter how you slice it. But even, the younger ones that are snapping out of it, they know that it's the influence of the church that came through South America and took all their culture, sucked all their souls out, made everyone just kind of like middle of the road and neutral and passive and easy to rule, So it's not, you are what you do. You are what you do. Stop trying to reframe Christianity as something it could be, or what, just stop it. Just let go of it. All of these old systems, it's time to move forward into the future, clear of all this, get these skeletons out of our closet. All of these Bronze Age religions that have been following us around like an unwanted groupie at an after party. It's time it's time for them to reap what they've sowed. The Christians crying about persecution these days, it's like, oh, well, I guess you reap what you sow. It's just the craziest thing ever to hear that particular group of people crying about being persecuted after the last, 2,000 years of skullduggery. But it is true, that in some ways we have more freedoms than we have ever had. With psychedelics being legalized all around the United States, I think the significance of that is probably lost on a lot of people in the US, because, I'm 44 years old, and I never thought that I would see that happen. We have a long way to go, of course. But even when marijuana started getting legalized in places like Virginia, my mind was blown. And I think that as long as we have a world where it's possible to travel and take psychedelics without persecution, you should more or less be content with that. I mean, if we can just get to the point where you can consume whatever compounds you want and still travel around a bit, that's good enough for me. And I think the reality is that it's not really out of the question that these advances in AI and quantum computing and all that stuff could actually be the final equalizer. It could be the gateway into this sort of fifth dimensional reality that all of these New Agers have been predicting forever. I've seen that version, or some version of that prophecy, with so many different cultures. It's kind of hard to ignore it. And the basic idea is that there is some sort of chaostrophe, some sort of calamity, some sort of worldwide disaster. And from that chaos, from that chaostrophe, a new order, a new world emerges, the 1,000 years of peace predicted by the Bible, the Hopi, all of these different traditions have some version of this. So I think it's a fair bet that this is bubbled up from the unconscious somehow. All the information in the universe should already exist if it's true that time is not linear. And we also know that information is not lost at the subatomic level. So there should be some sort of residual form of energy that contains all of this information, past, present, and future, somewhere. So, that's one of the techniques of scientific illuminism, is that you kind of scan the terrain and you look for these ubiquitous ideas that have, especially when they have no when they're from disparate cultures. For example, the mercury moats around the Nahuatl burial chambers that also were in some of the Egyptian ones, that sort of thing where, it's like, and then you also have Mercury as the psychopomp that ferries the dead, from the world of the living in Greece. So we have all these remarkable connections between these archetypal concepts. And so when we have these prophetical things that pop up all over the place, I think it's, it really makes the likelihood higher that it's some kind of legitimate prophecy, I guess, for lack of a less wooey word. But yeah, and the other element of that is that, people tend to want to believe in some kind of fantastical version of reality, especially I think when things get so hoary like they are now. We're in very uncertain times. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of danger. There's a lot of very rapid transformations happening. There's some uncertainty, but maybe even worse is that there are certainties that people don't know how they're going to contend with. Or certainties that yield uncertainty, maybe, is the scariest thing. And that's partly the case in this whole thing with AI and what the ultimate consequence of that is going to be. So we create all these fantastical ideas that, there's going to be some shift in the fundamental structure of reality, and we're going to go into a fifth dimensional portal and all of this kind of stuff that's probably complete nonsense. But it is also possible that there are actual real world mechanisms that could, coagulate in such a way that we are liberated from the servitude and the unhappiness and the vapidity of the culture that we have been trapped in. I mean, when you look at mainstream music and you look at the type of artists and movies that are popular, we have been deliberately engineered to be empty and vapid and to be purposeless, because for me, as a person that has always had a very rich internal experience, I have never felt the need to watch TV. You know what I mean? I don't need any entertainment at all. My mind is busy all the time. My imagination is busy all the time. I don't need any entertainment. Like, I don't really read books anymore. I don't ever watch television. I don't need to be entertained because I am alive inside. You know what I mean? And so the incentive to drive people into that state and to deliberately use social engineering to create these zombie consumers. If we can take that motivation out of the equation, we very well could see a sort of utopian world where things are built around a different set of priorities, priorities of more substance. So, and I also tend to think that there's a universal mind that it doesn't really guide things the way that a lot of people would like to believe, the sort of sky god fairy tale thing. But it does seem that this has all been set into motion with certain elements as part of the wiring under the board, the structural components of it, that do actually offer some kind of assurance that it's going somewhere sensible. The fact that all systems tend towards homeostasis is a really positive element of the structure of the universe, because it suggests that despite all of this chaos and uncertainty and the turbulence and dissonance, that we're actually, it's like negative and positive are canceling each other out until it comes into a kind of balance. And so, that along with certain other elements suggest very strongly that we are going to end up in a place that actually makes sense, because I think our only purpose in this universe is to be like, sensory organs and to have experience on behalf of the consciousness that permeates the universe. And so, if it's doing anything deliberately, if it has any kind of objective, you would think that it would be to provide circumstances where we can fulfill our obligation and our duty and our honor, really, to experience the most fulfilling, interesting, novel experiences that possibly can be generated with this format of creation, right? So if anybody is here that hasn't hit the like button yet, please do. I don't know, with my algorithm deprioritization, deprioritizing if it does anything or not, but I still appreciate it. And also, you guys, please do support us via the options in the chat or join the Patreon. Super interesting in the Patreon. I kind of hate it when I make these, like, best content that I have to offer and only a handful of people see it. So we got to get more people in there. Because I do that. I do deliberately put the best information in the Patreon. So let me look at the chat and see if there's anything that I have missed. Somebody said we are not enlightened yet. I don't know that I agree with that. I think I am enlightened, actually. And I don't think that it's really this like unattainable, we have this idea that enlightenment is some state or place that is the end result of 40 years of sitting in a cave or whatever. I don't think that's necessarily true. In fact, I think it would be pretty common if it wasn't for the influence of dogma and indoctrination and culture and all of that kind of stuff. I think the process of interacting and interfacing with the universe without those dissonances, interfering without the interference patterns, it would be pretty common. And I think it's also a gradient. It's a spectrum. You can be a little bit enlightened. You can be medium enlightened. You can be totally and completely enlightened, absolute enlightenment. So yeah, I don't think that's necessarily true. There are definitely lots of enlightened people, and it's really interesting to me that it turns out that what enlightened actually means is that you have had the experience of existing as a photon. That is what enlightenment really is, I think. When you fully suspend the reducing valve in our nervous system, you experience the universe from the point of view of light. And if you think about how the sages and prophets and mystics describe that experience, that's exactly what it sounds like when you bear in mind that the photon, moving at the speed of light, there's no time and there's no space, and you exist, but you're also nothingness. Photons have no mass. So that's what I think is happening there. You're literally temporarily merging your consciousness with the light. And from that point of view, it's eternal. It's the same. It's unchanging. There's no desire. There's no will towards anything. It's totally neutral. And it's described as light in all the famous texts and stuff. And, I've had the experience of actually becoming a photon and seeing things from that point of view. I spoke with a friend the other night who had that happen, during ayahuasca. It usually happens with San Pedro, though. So if you want to experience that, you need to have somebody overlooking, trip sitter or shaman, whatever. At least someone that's capable of making sure you don't hurt yourself, because very, very high doses of mescaline, the kind of dose that is responsible for this experience, that catalyzes this kind of experience, is very high. And blackouts are very common with high doses of mescaline, and they last for a really, really, really long time. So you really have to make sure that you do it safely, but it's pretty reliable that if you take enough San Pedro, you will experience from the point of view of the light itself. Well, yeah, Adrian, I wasn't saying that all people are enlightened at all. That's definitely not the case. In fact, NPCs, I think, don't even believe that it's real. And then people that are religious have absolutely no chance of actually having any spiritual experience at all whatsoever. Depending on how they've interpreted the religion, but if they take the institutionalized version, that's what it's for. It's actually designed to ensure that you do not have the transcendental experience in any kind of authentic way, because if you do, it dissolves all of the structures that have been implanted into your consciousness by your overlords, and people that do not need to be governed don't tolerate it very well. And so It's like one of the primary objectives of religious indoctrination is to ensure that people do not have actual spiritual experience, because then it's not possible to control them. That's what happens. And the transcendental experience also does increase intelligence. This is something that a lot of people, I think, probably undervalue. But it has been documented with clinical studies of LSD, even where 2 people out of 1,000 or something went from below average to average IQs to actually full-blown geniuses and remain there. That happened in research at Princeton. The real explanation of that, I think, is not really in the drug. It is what happens when the individual consciousness is exposed to the universal mind or the divine mind, however you want to think about it. And it helps that, these compounds make the brain more neural plastic and increase neurogenesis. So you're, building new neural pathways much faster, and the old ones are more predisposed or more able to rearrange themselves. So when you take this imprint from this greater mind, you're more likely to retain it. A lot of people have this experience randomly, even where, they're just a regular ass person, and all of a sudden it's like they break through and have some major revelation that seems like it's coming from some order of intelligence that they don't normally possess. And so, I think that's sort of the same thing as when your TV flickers. I know people probably don't have flickering TVs as much anymore, but the thing that I mean. Only because of the nature of the antenna and the way that it's set up in our biology, that flicker is kind of the opposite of what happens with a TV. The signal comes in when the thing flickers off. I think that's pretty much a certainty at this point. I always like to remind people, go check out Michael Levin, the work of Michael Levin, because he's really revolutionizing how science is understanding, morphology. And he's talking about how there's a field that really governs the evolution of organisms and contains all kinds of information. He's done experiments that prove it absolutely. And down to confirming possibly one of Terence McKenna's ideas about the attractors in hyperspace, that there's sort of electromagnetic, I guess, like geometric, composites of some kind that influence the evolution of the world from the future back. Something along those lines. He's saying that there are these attractors that actually frame the electromagnetic impulses so that they communicate properly with the cells. Pretty interesting stuff. Anyways, I honestly don't even remember why I brought it up. But yeah, that's it. The transcendental experience actually imparting intelligence to people. And it's also true that religious people tend to have lower IQs. And I am convinced that it's the religion itself that imposes that upon them in part. For a lot of reasons, but you actually have to, if you really think about the effect that a religion like Christianity has on people's psychology, it actually gets really scary when you play it all the way out. The necessity of carrying around cognitive dissonance, of staring facts in the face and having to refute them, and to also believe it absolutely. So when you're confronted with something that challenges or deconstructs your reality tunnel, you are obligated under threat of hellfire to do whatever psychological gymnastics are required in order to avoid your faith being relegated to the dustbins of your life and hopefully history. And then that carries over into other areas of your life, right? So you have been indoctrinated and programmed to do these crazy gymnastics, in order to maintain your religious faith. And then when it comes time to follow some political leader, you are already predisposed to this kind of like next level idiocy. You are adept at it because you've had to do it your entire life in order to maintain your faith. And so, and there are other elements of it as well that, keep people kind of trapped with unrealistic expectations and unable to really have a holistic experience of the universe. And there are other ramifications too, emotionally and psychologically, of the way that we understand sexuality and sex and the way that people judge each other. And, there's just so much that is restricted, and your consciousness and your brain, your thoughts, your intellect, its malleability and adaptability is its greatest asset. And when it's frozen solid by dogma, then it's not able to, expand and adapt and react to the life experience that would cultivate a higher degree of intelligence and consciousness and perception. So it really is terribly tragic. Not to mention, in the case of Christianity, the idea that you can put your sins on some zombie spirit and then you don't have to really improve yourself. You don't have to work on yourself. You don't have to do anything. You can just, please forgive me, Jesus, and then you get to go to heaven. And so you can be a complete dirtbag your entire life. And I was in jail once, and this guy had tried to beat someone to death with a tire iron, almost succeeded. I think the guy was, retarded afterwards. And I asked him, you're so Christian, how could you do that? And he's like, that's why I can do that. Because Jesus will forgive me for anything I do. So don't think that people don't actually use this mentality to excuse all kinds of atrocious behaviors. Evils against other people are oftentimes validated in the minds of these people because you're non-Christian, so you're going to hell anyways. Might as well start the torture early because it's just God. I'm just doing God's work, Yeah, it's absolutely horrific. Even the idea that Jesus should suffer for your sins sort of integrates into people's perceptual apparatus, this idea that it actually makes sense and that it's divinely ordained that someone else should suffer on your behalf, that you somehow are not going to be sort of karmically responsible for your misdeeds and your discrepancies and all of that stuff, that's going to be put on somebody else that's going to be tortured or has been tortured already for your behavior. So there are just so many levels of the horrific influence that I think a lot of the apologists for Christianity and other religions like Islam, they're not really thinking it all the way through. They're not really analyzing the impact of these religious ideologies on people's psychological disposition and how warped and toxic it really actually is. It's terrifically terrible in all actuality. And bringing this back to the AI conversation, the advent of a 3,000 IQ entity is likely to help to dissolve these old structures and belief systems to a very high degree. The thing that I think, the most excited about is the potential, though, for it to expose the political systems and the elite, because when people ask it questions, it's going to tell the truth. And when that happens, all of these, monsters it's going to be like Scooby-Doo. The mask is pulled off and you're like, oh, you're just that fucking bastard Rothschild or whatever. Yeah, and by the way, you guys, we still have room in the retreats. If you guys don't let me know about November soon, if we don't get a few people booked, I'm not, I'm going to go to Vilcabamba or something. So you have to let me know pretty quickly if we're going to do November or not. And then we still have room in October. I know it's kind of short notice, but you can come for the last week. So you still have, 3 weeks to get it together. So contact me about that. I'm also considering doing one in Vilcabamba, because we can actually go pick mushrooms down there and it'd be really cool. And I can also take you guys out to the giant San Pedro forests in Malacatos. They're like, 30 feet tall and 100 arms or whatever. The biggest one, unfortunately, I showed up one day to take a video of it and it had been razed to the ground by the local farmers, which was unbelievably sad. It was the biggest San Pedro I've ever seen. It was massive. So yeah, make sure you get in touch with me if you want to do that. Also, if I do stay here in the jungle, the family is going away for at least 3 weeks in November. So some of you have expressed interest in doing one-on-one work with me. It's possible that you might be able to just rent a week of my time in November. And in such a case, then I'm basically available to you 6 days a week, 8 hours a day to pick my brain and whatever it is that you would like, and ayahuasca and psilocybin and all of those sort of things as they are appropriate throughout that time period. So we're excited. We're moving back to the retreat center property tomorrow. It's right down the street. We're only, a couple miles away. And then we're beginning again, I think, on the 9th. So excited about that. Also, if you guys have any questions that, if you can't afford ayahuasca or you can't drink it or just don't want to, if you're interested in what Pachamama has to say about stuff, leave those questions in the comments and I will ask, and I will do occasional live streams where I will tell you what the medicine has told me. And I'll tell you something right now, since we're kind of on the subject of the approaching New World Order and the possibility of dystopia or utopia. Well, that's ridiculous that you're on probation for mushrooms, because it's super stupid that they're illegal anywhere. They're pretty damn harmless no matter what, and extremely beneficial, and that's just totally lame as hell. I was just about to respond to something. Damn. Yeah, I don't know what the hell I was about to say. Oh, something about the subject of utopia and dystopia and what we can do about it. Oh yeah, ayahuasca telling me. A friend of mine was asking me, can you ask the medicine, what should we do right now? Like, what is coming? And she said, well, the first thing you need to do is not be worried about spiritual questions at the moment. You need to make as much money as possible, because however much money you have when this transition happens, that's where you're going to be permanently. So, you don't need to be worrying about who you were in a past life or, whatever it is. What you need to do is make money right now. That's it. Like, use AI. And what she told me was that AI cryptocurrencies, there are going to be some launches coming up that are going to make the kind of money that Bitcoin made from, its inception, its launch until 2016 in a matter of a couple of months. So, creating some, and also that one of the best things I can do in terms of, what we need to do collectively is actually pick a crypto that is low with a large group of, say, like 100,000 like-minded people or more, and get it at the launch and blow it up. Maybe I'll start it or something. I don't know. But that's really a big part of the problem. People wanted to use cryptocurrency to get out from underneath of the banks. And that is absolutely brilliant, absolutely essential. One of the only things we can do to avoid being under the complete and total control of UBI is to create or, agree on a cryptocurrency, because as long as they are subject to market whims and everyone is trying to buy, what is there, like 100,000 different tokens or something now? As long as that's the case and everybody's just spraying their money in all these different directions, it's never going to work. It's never going to work. The only way it'll work is if we collectively choose something and everyone actually sticks to it. Otherwise, it's just pointless. And that's, strange to get advice from ayahuasca about cryptocurrency and whatnot. But, from the point of view of the plant, apparently, she was telling me I help people that can help me, meaning you will try to protect the jungle and I know it. So, I'll show you where the gold is, basically. But yeah, you guys, we really do need to configure ourselves meaningfully and really come up with a movement. And we need to make sure that we have platforms to communicate where we're not going to be subject to censorship. And we really need to start to make a kind of coherent movement that we can get people excited about and involved with, that has its ideals and objectives very clearly defined, And I think really, we are at a point in human history where the potential is greater than it has ever been. What life really should be is the end game should be that humanity has engineered, using technology and the wisdom that it has cultivated throughout the ages to actually make an aggregate of the sum total of all of that and do something with it. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, but to automate, all of our hard work and liberate ourselves from servitude so that we can do what we're really here to do, which is experience nature and each other and sexuality and music and all of these things, so that our artists and musicians can be totally devoted to their crafts, and so that no one is denied that based on their economic standing when they're born, which, people have all these misconceptions about that in the United States, that it's open to everyone and all you got to do is work really hard and shit. It's not real. It's never been real. Every single band ever, pretty much. There's a few exceptions, but almost all of them had a rich kid, at least one rich kid in the band, so they could pay the bills while they were, touring until they get signed, or they can actually buy getting signed or whatever. Tool even likes to brag about how they were only 7 gigs in when they got signed, but that could be maybe because their guitarist was already a Hollywood hotshot with tons of connections, and you know what I mean? It's just, it's very silly. But the system is rigged. It's totally rigged. And the reality is that all of these robots and advanced AI could equalize it and finally give everyone equal opportunity based on the merit and talent of the individual, and not based on who their parents were, because that's pretty much how it is in the current era. And not only that, but just the access to information. If you have an AI with a 3,000 IQ that you can interface in your home, we're going to have common men, people from the bottom of the barrel that have access to the same kind of education that people at Harvard do, and then some beyond that. So, I think there is an element to be concerned that the elites, they're on the threshold of their swan song and epilogue is upon them, and it should be them and not us. But the whole entire concept and need and purpose and of government is about to disappear in the practical sense. It is no longer necessary. We were going to have AI that can do it better and are going to do it better. And there's absolutely no reason to have humans who are biased and corruptible and can be bought and influenced, whereas the AI doesn't give a flying fuck about, lobbying and, you know what I mean? It doesn't care at all. It's just answering questions, honestly. You know what I mean? Think about what that's going to do to corruption and government and manufacturing and everything, medicine. And of course, it creates a lot of problems too, because one of the things that's been concerning me the most is the life extension. Because we already have, I don't care what anyone says, way too many people. There's this sort of biblical mandate that I think a lot of people that are just kind of right-leaning, even if they're not like, fundamentalist Christians have, that we are just supposed to breed and make more and more humans and and it just, that's the point of existence. It's not. It just isn't. In fact, here in South America, back in the old tribal days, there are so many plants here in the jungle that are abortifactants. And before there was anyone ruling over people that needed laborers, the people would manage their own population. If people knew they had a bad genetic disposition that they didn't want to pass on to the tribe, then they would not have children. And so many other factors that would influence whether or not they wanted to expand. You know what I mean? We're supposed to be self-governing. And I really hope that one of the things that happens with the dissolution of the old paradigm is that people go back to a sort of tribal orientation where, right now we have this very ego-based relationship with our progeny, with our children. My child is special and more special than all the other children. And, I think in the tribal setting, people were probably less attached to whose child they were individually. Because without all of these corrupting influences, without all of the, vapidity being engineered by the government elite intentionally to make them empty consumers, the byproduct of that is a degradation of moral sense and substance, right? So, of course, we have all of these, pedophiles and drunks and drug addicts and violent people and all this stuff. It's a byproduct of the intentionally engineered vapidity and emptiness that is created in people in order to sustain capitalism. That's what it's for. That's why it's done. That's why all major movies are stupid beyond belief. That's why mainstream music is dumb as hell and will just rot your brain right out of your head so it drips out of your ears in a liquid, soupy foam. You know what I mean? And so, I think if we can negate that influence, we'll have a different attitude towards what it means to be a town or a village. And the children will be raised more collectively. This, egoic sort of narcissistic, weird idea that people tend to have in our culture about what children are. Hopefully that will be subject to de-emphasis and de-evolution going forward. And it's just true, not everyone should breed, and we don't need to just overwhelm the planet with people. So that's one of the main things that we need to worry about, actually. And then also modern science, and this really controversial thing that I don't want to say anything about on this channel, but artificially preserving people's lifetimes when they're unhealthy and, so that they can propagate more bad genes. This is part of the reason that humanity is degrading. It's not supposed to be like that. Nature, a lot of people that believe in God don't seem to understand that if you have upset the balance, don't you think this creator that you admire so much knew what it was doing in terms of like the function of viruses and other, ways that it has of managing populations? This is something that needs to be addressed, and I guess what started this rant was just the simple fact that life extension is here. And I don't know how that is going to affect all of this. It's one of the reasons that I'm concerned about some extreme population reduction, because, at first it's only going to be the wealthy that have money for this. Adrenochrome, by the way, is the dumbest conspiracy theory ever. It was never real. There's no truth to it at all whatsoever. I know exactly what adrenochrome is and what it's used for. People say that it's from your brains because they don't even realize the adrenal gland is not in your brain. It's the dumbest thing ever. And it's definitely unnecessary at the current juncture. They have reversed aging in cells of eyeballs, and there's been a couple of things that have happened in the last year or so that have made life extension possible already. It's already possible. So, just in the interest of putting everything on the table that we have to consider as we're approaching this transition, that's a major one. If a lot of people stop dying, who exactly is admitted to this technological utopia? That question is going to need to be answered. And I personally think that it's not exactly what people are expecting. I think that the fact that we are kind of allowed to be aware of where the poisons are, what they are, where they're coming from. I mean, think about this. People say that, the thing that you get is part of the population reduction. Well, then why are they killing all the compliant people and letting all the rebels survive? There is a good reason for that. Aleister Crowley, a couple hundred years ago, said about this time, too. He predicted even the amount of time that would go by before. A lot of people would say that was just insider knowledge, but he said, society only moves by the light of genius. The herd will be destroyed in mass. And so, when you see stuff like that, you have to stop and do a double take and say, well, wait a minute. Kind of actually looks like they're trying to preserve the free thinkers and the most creative and the most intelligent, and actually get rid of the ones that just have no purpose at all, the empty, vapid, pointless ones, And it may seem a bit callous, but it's like, just imagine that you are the objective management of the entire planet, and you get a paper on your desk and it says, you can either, get rid of some people now, and cause some suffering, or you can lose the entire game and everything is gone. What do? You have to make a difficult decision, but you have to be objective about it. And I think that when it comes to understanding how it is that this planet is managed, a lot of people see evil where it's actually just necessity. And I'm not saying that it couldn't be improved upon, but from my vantage point, from my point of view, it just seems like things are far more complicated than people think. And if you have that knee-jerk reaction on the surface level, it inhibits your ability to dig deeper and to really have a profound understanding of what it is that you're actually looking at. In order to really understand the processes that are occurring on this planet, I think you kind of have to suspend your human judgment and be able to really objectively analyze the holistic picture, and, not just look at it from the basic point of view of a normal human, because that's not what's managing it. That's not, it's one of the reasons why I think a lot of enlightened people seem kind of morose about it. Yeah. So, there are tremendous changes coming down the pipes. I should probably get off. I think this is the highest number of people that we have had in a live stream in several years. So that's really good to see. I really appreciate every single one of you. Please do hit the like button, share my videos. 2% of my views come from YouTube suggesting my videos. 2%. That means that the 1,100,000 views, or whatever it is that I have, 1,001,000 actually, have come from people, mostly from people sharing my videos on other platforms like Discords, Reddit. I have no presence on Reddit, so if you're a Redditor and you like my content, please share it there. Join my Patreon, where there's all kinds of, insider secrets from the world of Freemasonry taken directly from their, secret books, formerly secret books, stuff about alchemy, ritual magic, patron-only content, all kinds of stuff. It goes back for 4 or 5 years. So it's a tremendous resource of very valuable information, I think. And, I'm demonetized, so I don't get anything for this unless you guys support me. So there are options to do so in the chat, and we are moving tomorrow. So I should probably shut up and let my partner come in, and we're going to get packed. And then tomorrow, I think I'm going to do another mushroom. Well, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate all you guys that share this content, because I put a tremendous amount of work into it over the last 5 years or so, and it's been really frustrating to get shadow banned like this. And, my content is buried on Facebook. My Instagram is buried. My TikTok got shadow banned because of a video that I made about how the media is owned by one person, and how all of the different smaller media they're conglomerates, and they all are saying, you know what I mean? I put that video up, and my TikTok, where I have 57,000 followers and like 23 million views, dropped to like 100 views, and then the videos just die. So, and it happened on YouTube and TikTok at the exact same time over the same video. So, if you're wondering about the consolidation of power and this one world government thing, it does seem like even the Chinese platform is now working with the San Francisco based platform to control the free flow of information. So that is one of our biggest obligations and responsibilities to each other and to any kind of coherent movement that we might have. That, we have to ensure the free flow of information so that we can all communicate and organize and actually make some sort of meaningful impact. We're more well suited to a meaningful evolution than we ever have been before. Some of us have achieved a high level of illumination in step with the humility that tempers that into a meaningful resource. And we may actually be able to create intentional communities at this point that aren't taken over by some narcissist lunatic. I mean, people are still very susceptible to that. There's a certain very famous person right now that I feel like has achieved that kind of like, invincibility based on that sort of narcissistic, what is it called, where you can like win people over? You guys know what I mean. Anyways, so thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, PayPal, and all that stuff. Send us millions and millions of dollars. One of the things I need to do actually is get rid of my laptop and my phone and my partner's phone. This is the advice that I've gotten from a social media attorney that we have to, because they are actually analyzing your keystroke speed, your idiosyncrasies, all this stuff, and also what devices have been in close proximity to your devices if you've been shadow banned. The only way to overcome it is to replace all of your shit all at once. So I'm going to have to start over fresh, and I'm not even going to be able to have any of this stuff in my house. So that's going to mean that I'm going to have some kind of income somehow, without having any kind of social media reach, which is going to be really difficult for me, but I'm definitely going to try to do it. And you guys can really help me out with that if you value what I'm doing. So thank you guys again so much, and I'll see you again in a few days.